Okay, it's just about noontime here on the East Coast. My name is Mike Venanzi. I'm the clinical director with VisualDx, and joining me today is Azine. She is a clinician out of the Baton Rouge, Louisiana area.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining, Azine. Today's focus on our bi-weekly Wednesday webinar is going to be surrounding skin of color. And this has become an important topic across medicine. While this is an important topic, this isn't something new to VisualDx. It's been a focus of ours for the last 21 years. For those of you that are familiar with VisualDx, we have arguably the world's best collection of medical images. Roughly a third of all of our images are patients of color. That's 4, 5, and 6 on the Fitzpatrick scale. Today, we're going to focus on some enhancements that we've made on our homepage on the VisualDx application, really allowing the clinician to be more focused specifically to patients of color when it comes to dermatology. So I want to take this time to highlight some of those features. So if you just give me one moment, I'm going to be sharing the VisualDx homepage, and we'll go from there. We have a number of participants on the line. If you do have any questions at all at any time, feel free to enter them in. I'll also have my contact information at the end of the webinar, so anyone can reach out to me with anything specific. On the homepage, if you're familiar with VisualDx, we've changed it quite a bit really since the beginning of COVID-19. On the left-hand side, I want to highlight that we've also included the most up-to-date information surrounding COVID-19 through the CDC, the World Health Organization, as well as the European Union, as well as information surrounding our telehealth enhancements that we can add to clinics all over the world. On the main page here is something that's changed just over the last week with VisualDx, and that's really a workflow enhancement for you, the clinician, to really just jump right into addressing patients of color and coming up with an accurate diagnosis and helping aid through a guided dermatological differential. So you can do that a couple different ways. You can always type in a diagnosis into the search bar here. So if I were just to view atopic dermatitis, I could just jump right to atopic dermatitis and learn more about it through the synopsis, billing codes, things to look for, differentials, best tests, and how to manage it along with the therapy options. But what's changed on each diagnosis page is the ability to easily pivot from all skin types to specifically skin of color. And you can do that just by selecting this option on the right-hand side. Once I view the images and select the types of images that you want, you can see how it really narrows it down specifically to patients of color. You can even adjust the skin pigmentation along the entire Fitzpatrick scale. So if I wanted to seek just type 5 and 6, I can easily adjust that and see those images, and even get even more specific by selecting the body location as well.
So I just want to add, I think this is a very helpful feature because we know certain conditions actually have different presentations in different races. So atopic dermatitis is a classic example of this, where the skin findings may appear different in different races and different ethnicities. And also we see that in other diseases like pityriasis rosea. So this is very helpful, to just be able to quickly snap to skin of colors, and you see all the images right then and there.
Yeah, we'll add to that, Azine, this is a great patient engagement component of VisualDx. The ability to turn your phone over to the patient, or your iPad, or even laptop computer, showcase similar images that best represent the patient. Patients appreciate this. It's also great from a clinician standpoint. We as humans are really, really good at pattern matching and seeing what's presented on the patient and comparing it to a world-class image collection with VisualDx. You'll be able to really be more confident in your clinical decision making when it comes to at the point of care and using a tool like VisualDx.
And this is also very helpful for if you're using telemedicine, and you can actually share your screen with your patient, and it helps establish trust, like Mike was saying, that they really feel like you got the right diagnosis because they see something that looks like their own skin type. And sometimes that's even more helpful if the patients sometimes come in with a preconceived notion. They've Googled something, and they may be Googled something else. And whenever you're telling them, no, I think it's this, this is a way to be able to say, look, I can back it up. Here are images that look just like you. And that really helps the patient have confidence in your diagnosis.
That's great. And just another highlight here, you can always adjust the patient from an infant, child to an adult, depending upon the diagnosis. So if I wanted to pivot and let's say I want to look up atopic dermatitis in a child, that will also adjust the image collection as well. So the other approach to VisualDx, for those of you who are familiar with us, you've got the forward-thinking approach where you've got a chief complaint and you're not really sure what the diagnosis is, but you want to build off of that chief complaint through a guided workup to ultimately create that differential. So what we've added here are these icons on the lower half of the screen here. You can use us all across medicine, not just dermatology. As the focus of today's webinar is specifically towards patients of color, I'm going to really zone in on this new addition and enhancement to the VisualDx application. Users have the ability to just jump right to it. So this is a workflow enhancement where you're seeing a patient of color and you want to do a workup for a patient that might have a rash. So you can select this icon right here, and you can select more of the common chief complaints. This isn't limited to just these 6. You could always type in a chief complaint into the search bar here. But if I were to have a patient that has multiple skin lesions, such as a rash, I would then go right into the guided workup. And you see, just because I've selected skin of color, it automatically has these dermatological skin lesions, which are available for you to select and also educate yourself on how to properly define those skin lesion types, especially for those that are the non-dermatologists. This is a very helpful tool with education. On the right-hand side, you can always adjust the patient's age as well as their gender at birth. And then you can go through and actually select the lesion type. So when you select the category with the plus sign, you can actually go through and get a brief description on how to properly define each of these dermatological skin lesions under that category. So when we look at a smooth papule or smooth plaque, we can click that plus sign and get a quick description as to how to differentiate between each of the 4 that are listed in this category. You can also scroll through and see how they appear from the touch of a human, see how that compares from a cyst through a smooth nodule. But if we wanted to add it, we could continue to go through here, and let's just say we want to have a blanching patch as a lesion type. We can then select the location of the lesion. So we can get specific and say that it's, let's say, on the trunk. And as we go through this, this is adding to the findings section. We could also say that there's itch, potentially a fever, and the appearance of the patient is ill. The onset findings is acute. I could have hit the differential at rash. The point is, as we continue to add findings, that's going to narrow down your differential field. And you'll see once we select view differential, how that appears. So you can see as we've selected the differential, you're now viewing consider first, which is the more common diagnoses. And this is really where premature closure happens often in medicine. You can also select consider second, emergencies, infectious diseases, drug-induced, or you can view them all. As I scroll over each of the diagnoses, these are all weighted findings from top to bottom. So you can see a drug eruption is matching 7 of 7. And as I move over to the right, cellulitis, for example, is matching 6 of 7 with itch being crossed off.
So what I really appreciate about this differential builder is that it truly does serve to be a safety net. As Mike was mentioning earlier about premature closure, that is something that we commonly encounter in practice. You know, we're limited by time and energy and resources, you know, often in a busy clinic, and you might have a case that comes in and you really only have seconds to think about your differential. And what happens is you might only generate 3 or 4 things, and you might be leaving out a lot of things from your differential that you should be considering. This is more likely to happen, I find, if, especially if you're treating a demographic that you're not used to seeing as being the largest component of your patient population. So for example, for African American people, a lot of times skin rashes are missed or diagnoses are missed just because things like erythema is more subtle. Findings can be different in different races. And so this is really serving to be a way to kind of step back and like, okay, let me consider everything to keep my patient as safe as possible.
Great, Zine, thanks so much. Just to highlight, as you continue to go through here, consider first is your common. These are your common diagnoses. As you scroll through to the very bottom of the page, you'll see less and less of the findings matching up. So as we get to the bottom, there'll be 5 out of 7, 6 out of 7. These are all proprietary algorithms that we've created and scored through our physician-led organization, where we actually rank these in order based on the findings that are presented and the diagnoses that are potentially there in the differential. Consider second is rare occurrences, emergencies. Anything highlighted in red is life-threatening, infectious diseases, drug-induced, or you can view them all. If we wanted to go into a specific diagnosis, we can just select that and view the full article.
And speaking of drug eruptions, this is actually in that differential search, when you saw the different tabs, I think it's very important that there is a drug tab. The reason why is we are living in an era of polypharmacy, meaning our patients are seeing multiple doctors, clinicians, and they are put on different medications. And oftentimes these physicians may not be aware even that the patient's on extra medications. And so we do see a lot of complications, and I think a lot of times this is often neglected, but we're kind of seeing the medication list grow longer and longer. So this is very appropriate that no matter what, we always consider infectious. I mean, obviously we're in the era of COVID, right? And so we know that infectious etiologies can always present at any time, and they can be mimickers. And so same with drugs. So and actually one of the nice things, and Mike is going to get to this in a second, is there is drug reaction data on every single VisualDx content page. So no matter what the diagnosis is, there is drug reaction data. And so, for example, for atopic dermatitis that we were looking at earlier, or even like psoriasis, things like that, whenever you're looking at the diagnosis, you can always click that button and it'll bring you to the most commonly associated drugs that can actually induce the disease. And librarians are constantly mining this data, and you actually have evidence-based citations linking out directly to the articles.
Yeah, as Azine mentioned, just looking at the psoriasis page, you can see the medication reactions in alphabetical or numeric order, as I put it. And then once you select the number of citations, for example, the antibody here, you could actually click right out to the PubMed publication and see those citations listed. Everything is hyperlinked. The other approach to VisualDx, if you wanted to do the forward-thinking approach, if you've got a patient that's on a medication and they've got a chief complaint, you can just simply type in a medication like lisinopril and a chief complaint such as, let me just see here, enlarged lips. And so if we want to see if there's any citations of lisinopril linking to lipedema, we can just select those two findings alone, and it'll automatically go to the drug-induced tab through our machine learning mechanisms. And so when you see this in the lower right corner within the differential, you're actually seeing the number of citations of lisinopril linking to that diagnosis. So you see angioedema linking 17 citations to lisinopril. We can click that 17 and it'll pop right up, or I can go into the view full article and also select the drug reaction data, just as I did with psoriasis, view that medication in both alphabetical and numeric order, and potentially examine if other medications are contributing to this reaction. So as we conclude the Wednesday webinar, the priority or the focus of this webinar was really to highlight this new enhancement. It's something that we've always had within our system. We've just created a new workflow enhancement to just make it appear noticeable to our clinicians and our users. This icon is both available on the mobile device as well as the web version. One of the highlights that VisualDx has is our image collection. We have arguably the world's best collection of medical images. And it's been our focus to not just collect the classic presentation as you've seen. You're seeing the entire Fitzpatrick scale, different levels of severity, different body locations, and to be able to easily pivot through the VisualDx application to really help better engage with your patients, but also come up with an accurate diagnosis. We feel that this enhancement is really going to help all of you and those that are interested in VisualDx come up with, have a tool like VisualDx to really enhance your clinical decision support.
And I'd just like to add before we tie up everything. So educationally, I find that this is going to be very, very useful. And the reason why I say that is there was actually a recent study out in the JAD article in the JAD journal about how even the leading dermatology textbooks only have a very small percentage of skin of color images. And so this is actually one of the best resources to learning how different disease manifestations in skin of color, and it exceeds that of even the leading textbooks. I also find that this is going to be very useful for telemedicine and establishing trust, and then also as a safety net, because we do see more bias and misdiagnoses in skin of color because of the different presentations. And then also, I think this is going to save a lot of time because you no longer have to filter through images. You can just start off pretty much on any page in the VisualDx cycle. You're going to see that there is a button where you can actually just click skin of color. You don't have to go and filter for it anymore. And so that's going to save you time, a lot of time.
Great, thanks so much, Azine. We do have a Q&A option if anyone has any questions, but this will conclude the VisualDx webinar for this week. Again, we do host this on a bi-weekly basis. If you do have any questions, I do want to share my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you do have any questions at all.
I do see somebody has a raised hand.
I'm not sure that we're, oh, go ahead. I'm not sure that we're able to open that up. If you do have a question, you can simply type it into the chat. So the question is, how are rare disease covers, for example, leprosy in India? Thanks. That's a great question. So I'm going to actually go back and highlight VisualDx. This has become a big focus point for a lot of our users, especially when it comes to infectious diseases. So you can always just actually go in and type in the actual diagnosis. So if you just wanted to go to leprosy, for example, you can learn more about it. Go right to the page, look at the images, the billing codes, things to look for. But as far as navigating VisualDx when it comes to the country of origin or travel history, it's a great question. And for those that use VisualDx, you actually have the ability to enter in the state, country, or region. So if the patient, let's just say, is coming from India, you can type in India. And let's just say they have a rash. You can select a rash, and the onset findings we can say is acutely. We're also advising if there's any animal exposure, history. You can also continue to enter in, let's say they have a fever, and then we can view the differential. And because I've entered in India, it'll go automatically to the infectious disease tab. And so as you scroll over each of those diagnoses which are listed, you can see how India will match up with the findings that are presented with the patient. So you're seeing dengue fever come up first. You're seeing chikungunya, other diseases that maybe you're not familiar with, but because that patient just got back from that country or state or region, that plays a big role into the differential.
And I think this is a good example of you only know what you know. And so having something that is just a wealth of information like VisualDx is able to kind of broaden what you're able to diagnose. So for example, the Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever is not something that I am very well versed in. And so, but the fact that it shows up in red and it's telling you that this is an emergency, you better believe I'm going to try to make sure it's not that. Right? And that actually keeps my patient a lot safer. Otherwise, my patient is limited by my intellectual capabilities and what I've learned in my training.
Great question. And the other question came in is if this is going to be recorded. Yes, we do record these and we typically post them on our YouTube channel. We will be sending that out to everyone that participated. Thanks so much for that question. Any other questions that come to mind from the group? Great. So I'm going to leave my contact information here just for a few more moments. If you do have any questions at all, I'm a great point of contact for VisualDx. Just note that we do offer individual subscriptions as well as institutional licenses. We're in over 2,300 hospitals and large clinics globally. We integrate into the electronic health records such as Epic and Cerner. For those of you that do have questions surrounding our access, both individually and institutionally, you can reach directly out to me with my email address there. Great. Well, this will conclude the VisualDx Wednesday webinar. We just got one more chat. Thank you very much for attending. We hope that this was helpful, even for those that are familiar with VisualDx. We hope that you've learned something new. We're continuously looking to enhance our product and hope that this tool is really helping you come up with an accurate diagnosis for your patients and really assisting with patient engagement and education. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out, and thank you for your continued support.